Hey guys, Chris at the Ultimate Recycler. This Westinghouse oven was taken out of a house locally just recently, and I was asked to pick it up for e-waste. I rang the electrician because I knew him, and he said that it has an electronic issue with the control panel and it wasn't worth fixing. So given that, I am going to do a bit of a scrap challenge on it, and we'll see what value there is in an electric oven. I don't expect there's going to be much, but it's always nice to find out what's in these things. Now, as usual, we will do a bit of a test as far as what would it be worth purely as is to take to the scrapyard as dirty shred steel. So I'll get a bit of a weight on it in a moment. I'll balance it on the kitchen scales or bathroom scales. Then we'll scrap it and see what value we can get out of it, see if we can get any reusable parts, see if there's any electronics. There's going to be a bit of insulated wire, and there's going to be some clean pressing steel, but there's also going to be a bit of rubbish. So anyway, well, as usual, we'll use a notepad and we'll get you a bit of an idea of whether it's worth picking these up to scrap, whether you should just drop them off as they are, or whether you shouldn't touch them at all. Okay, I've got that balancing on the scales, and we've got to read it upside down, but it looks like 55 kilograms. So we'll grab the notepad and we'll make a note of that. So 55 kilos, but I did manage to get it up onto my bench. So we start the notepad, we'll write electric oven, and we'll start with our dirty shred option. 55 kilos. Now I'm going to work on 10 cents a kilo. It's actually better than that at the moment, but there's been plenty of times when it's been worse. So that would give us $5.50. So just to pick it up and drop it off the yard, $5 basically. Yeah, you may find that worthwhile. I've got a long way to go to the scrapyard from here, and I certainly wouldn't take it down. So I'm going to pull it apart. We're going to get a bit of hardware too. We might get, I would imagine there's going to be some big springs on the door. The other option is also to check eBay. We may be able to sell parts off it because it's not an overly old model. I can't see a date on it. I'm not sure what year it is, but that's always an option. But we'll scrap it out and we'll see what parts we get. We'll see what value we get, and we'll see if there's any good stuff in there. Okay, it's taken me a while to get back to this oven scrap out, but I've just started. I've spent half an hour so far, pulled a few panels off. We can see we're going to get quite a bit of insulated wire. There could be some switches and things that are of some value. There is a fan motor, and on the back there's another motor. So we're going to get a couple of electric motors out of it. There's also going to be some insulation material, and as expected, lots of pressing steel. I've managed to get both the door fronts off, and that's still a secondary piece of glass in that oven door. Out of the oven I also got, there was even a baking tray in there, but there's all the racks and some more panels there, and that's the glass. The hinges, bizarrely enough, they're actually just siliconed. The only thing holding the hinge into the door was silicon, so it shows you how temperature resistant that is. Some good springs there. I was hoping to get the hinges out in one go, thinking they might be useful, but from what I can tell, the only way to get them out is to tap through some of these roll pins, because it won't fit through the door and the gap in the door or the gap in the chassis frame. So that's fine. We'll just rescue the springs off them, and really there's going to be a lot of just steel as we expected. So half an hour in, I'll keep track of my time, and I'll report in shortly and see how far we've got. So another half hour in, so 1 hour so far, and it turned out with these hinges that once I compressed the spring a little bit and flicked it out of its holder, the rest of the hinge kind of folded up and came out of the slot quite fine. So it wasn't hard to get those out. I don't think I'm going to worry about them as hinges though. They're a special, obviously special built for this oven. I doubt there'd be a market for them second hand. They're going to be worn to a bit of a degree, even though it's a fairly new oven. The springs are good though, and most of you know that I have no trouble with selling hardware like that. And the rest of the springs can go in the little tub I've got going down there for just clean pressing steel. Now we've certainly added to the stack of pressing steel here. The sides have come off. The top panel where the control mechanisms were, there's a chute there which was for the airflow. And so what we've got left is the wiring loom all came off, and I will clip all the terminals off that so we get better value for the wire. But we may just weigh it up. At this stage we'll just weigh things up without micro scrapping anything. I have a few switches and things in here with the hardware, and this panel I believe was where the fault was, and it does look like it's been hot towards the back there. So that'll probably, well, that definitely will just go into the electronics to go out to the local transfer station. There's no scrap value really in there for me. So what we've got is all the panels off. We can see the oven area and the griller part. It's got that insulation on it. It has separated from the front panel, so it will all come apart very easily now. I'll clip these cables, these strapping, take the insulation off. I've still got to get a fan off the back here. We'll take all this packing off, and then the oven cavity and the grill part should just be clean pressing steel. One thing I forgot to mention earlier was that the handles that I got off the doors, they're actually cast aluminium, and they're fairly weighty, they're quite thick. So there's a little bit of value there, and all the doors came apart fine. This one though, the secondary glass piece is again siliconed in, and it just won't budge. It's pretty well just solid. I'm sure if I tried to get the glass out it would break. So given that that's still a fair percentage of steel, I'll just take that out to the transfer station as dirty steel. The other pieces of glass, we'll have to look at whether we can use them for something. Otherwise they will have to go to landfill, unfortunately. So there we go, we're getting a bit of value. I'll finish it up now. It won't take very long just to knock the rest of this apart and clean it up, and then we'll get the notepad out and do some sums. So only another 10 minutes to finish the job up. Everything just fell apart really easily. We're left with these two tubs, which will be excellent for storing up our clean pressing steel and taking them to the scrapyard. So they're pretty much clean steel. There's no contaminations on them other than the fact that they're painted or enamelled. The insulation, I'm not going to class that as rubbish because it's actually in fairly good sheets with silver foil on one side. It's not going to be an asbestos or anything in a modern stove. You'd have to be careful in an older stove. But it's going to be very good quality insulation, even though it's not super thick. And I'm currently lining my shed at home, and there would be no problems in using that in the wall of a shed to help insulate. It's basically free. We're better off using it like that than putting it in the bin. It's going to be fireproof because it was around an oven, so it would make excellent insulation. Even if you just lay it in your roof, if you haven't got an insulated house, do a few ovens and you'll eventually insulate your house. So I think that's a good use for that. The elements, there was elements everywhere because there was a two-stage griller, and the oven had a couple of elements in it. They're just going to go out to the transfer station here as dirty steel, as is that remainder of the oven door I mentioned before. Our pile of clean pressing steel added up quite a bit, and if you do a bit of sheet metal work, some of the pieces that came out were really nice just flat pieces, and it'd be easy to use those if you were after that sort of material. But what we'll do at this stage is we'll weigh it all up and get a bit of a price. Our tub ended up with quite a bit of pressing steel. Again, that's all clean. I've put aside these two electric motors, but we will weigh them up just as scrap motors, and we'll include all the hardware just as scrap steel at this stage, just to get the sort of phase 2 of our pricing. And that's all the rubbish I had, just the steels around the oven doors and a couple of plastic mounting blocks and various bits and pieces. I did break one of the knobs when it levered off, but that's not a drama. So there you go. Alright, let's weigh up the steel first and see what we got. I'll do this in 2 halves. So there's all the flat stuff. It's pretty much like a flat pack. It stacks really well now that it's all apart. And this pile weighs where are we, upside down, looks like 28 kilos, and we'll add the rest of it and we'll get a total for our clean pressing steel. And there's the rest of it, and we've got, looks like pretty much 10 kilos there, so that's 38 kilos of clean steel. Let's get our notepad. Okay, this was pretty much option 1, and option 2 we have clean, shred, we'll call it shred. Lots of these names are tossed around randomly. Shred generally refers to steel in one form or another. So we had 38 kilos, and we're going to work on 20 cents a kilo for the sake of round figures, and currently it's actually about 23 cents. So prices are pretty good right across the board actually. So that would be $3.80, $7.60. So we've increased our bottom line by simply cleaning up the steel, and we've got all the other goodies to go through now. Our two handles were cast aluminium and they weigh half a kilo. So we'll add that to our list here. Cast alloy or alloy is half a kilo, and we're going to work on $1 a kilo at the moment. It is, I was actually quoted $1.30 last week, so that's pretty good, but for the sake of these tests I do, I'm going to work consistently on these type of figures because they're round figures, they're easy to do the math. I'm giving you the weights, so it's quite easy to update this video to current prices if they're better or worse. So half a kilo, so that's 50 cents. Not bad for a couple of handles. We'll do the electric motors. If you were selling these as scrap motors, you'd probably need to break the fan assembly off this one. There's probably a little bit much steel in there, but we'll adjust that with regards to the price. We've got not far short of 1.5 kilos. Let's bring that down to say 1.2 just to allow for a little bit less weight if we take the steel off. So electric motors, well, we say 1.2, and we'll work on 50 cents. At the moment I've actually been quoted 80 cents, so that's a fair bit lower, but for a long time they were only about 50 cents. So that would be 60 cents. The insulated wire will just weigh up with plugs, so it'll go as low grade, so we're not spending any more time on it just at the moment. And we've got 400 grams. I'm going to work on $1.50 a kilo for low grade. Late last week I think E-Waste Ben took a load in and got $1.80, so that's pretty good with plugs and everything. So low grade wire. In the next step we will take the plugs off and just see how much difference that makes. Well, we got 400 grams, so 0.4 kilo. We'll say $1.50 is going to be 0.4's 60 cents. Alright, so what have we got left to weigh up as far as our scrap goes? That's probably it. So we'll get a tally on that, and then we'll move to the next stage of this scrap out and see if we can generate a bit more money without spending too much more time. And now for a total from phase 2. We've got 60, 120, 170, 230, 930. So the wash up from that, we spent, how long did we spend? An hour and 10 minutes. I'm going to say that's an hour, because if I did another one of these I reckon I'd do it in less than an hour. It was pretty easy going. It fell apart really easily at the end, and really it was just a little bit of extra time working out how to get the hinges apart, and plus also setting up for filming. So it would be a fairly easy 1 hour job, but you're only really making, what was that, $5.50? You're only making about $4 for an hour. So my opinion as far as scrapping at an oven, which is to be expected, is definitely not worth it. That's to that extent. Let's do a little bit more micro scrapping and just see. We'll also look at parts that I can sell and see if that adds up to a little bit of extra value to maybe make me consider picking one of these up again. Alright, so now we move on to phase 3 and just see what other value we can get. Now, to go back to phase 2, we will have to remove the 60 cent, both 60 cent options, because they will be changing. The cast aluminium and the clean shred will be the same. So that would be $8.10. So from above, now I've stripped all the wire. No, not stripped, I've taken all the plugs off it. $8.10. I don't think it's thick enough to worry about stripping. I usually don't worry on anything less than mains power cords. In fact, oh, there is a thicker piece here, but it's only a tiny piece. If there was a big roll of that, I would consider stripping it, but this gauge wire I don't. So that's all ready to weigh up. All the plugs are off it. Now I've weighed up all the plugs, all the terminals, because they're all brass. However, in saying that, you do have to be careful and always check them with a good strong magnet, because sometimes, especially on the end of the heating elements, they do use stainless steel ones, and if you put that in with your brass, you're going to contaminate the load. So we have, where are we? We have just over 50 grams of brass, so we'll add that to our list. So that would be an extra. So brass, 50 grams. Brass is particularly good. It's about $5.60 at the moment. I'm going to just say $5 for the sake of easy maths, and we get there is 25 cents. And we won't have lost too much weight because it was only 50 grams of brass. So we've got, yeah, well, 350 was around about right. That was 400 before, 400 grams, now 350. So let's go with our wire, our mid-grade wire, we call that, with no plugs. Mid-grade, 350 grams at currently $3, which is an awesome price for insulated wire. So that will be $1.15. No, that'd be $1.05. 105 for the insulated copper wire. Now that's the end of our scrap, but I'm going to get a little bit more value out of some of these other things. We had 2 electric motors. We'll just go EM for that, and they're over here. And there was the mounting plate for that one, which I've kept with it. This was the drove the fan in the oven, and incidentally, if you're taking one of these apart, the thread on that nut is left-hand thread. Took me a little while to work that out. So that's a good little motor. It's got a tag on it. It's 240 volt, 50 hertz. It's got spade connectors, so I just unplugged it. It's not damaged, and I know all these were working fine because the electrician just said that there was a control panel issue. So I think that little motor will probably get $5 in the shop, and this is also a 240 volt motor, which I'll also put $5 on. Now I may or may not get that, so let's just be very conservative and we'll say $5 the pair. So that's going to add a fair bit to our bottom line. Now around this other side we had these springs and some hardware. I also put aside some various rubber grommets and things, which will be handy for various people when they're building stuff. I would probably use some at home. There's the indicator lights on their short wiring loom. They'll be handy for someone. I often put those in a box, and when there's enough of them I'll just put $5 a lot. In the hardware there was some brass spacers which could go in brass, but I've got a jar full of spacers and I'm always looking through that for one. The controls, we have the thermostat. That was the one which I broke the knob on. It doesn't matter, it'd be easy to find one of those, so that's got to be worth something. The selector switch is in good order, and this was also, I think this was a selector switch for the grill, and there was the oven light as well. So all these are working. I did check eBay for Westinghouse parts, and there was lots of new ones, and they're fairly expensive, but the only second-hand ones I saw didn't sell. People were asking a bit for them, but I didn't see any that sold, so I don't think it's really worth trying to eBay them. However, I can put them in the shop, and if I just put these in a box, various switches, oven parts at $2 each, I'm sure someone will grab them for something. It probably won't be for a part for their oven. It's more likely for some project they're doing, and $2 each, you know, that's nothing. So it's not even a coffee these days, but that will give me $8 return. So probably only $1 worth of sundries in there, but let's add $9 to the list. We'll just call it hardware. $9. Now, is that all we had? Well, that's pretty much all, except for these oven and griller trays, or grills, or racks I guess you'd call them. These are in good order. They're a little bit grubby, but they're in very good condition. Now, I think they're better than scrap steel. The grill tray perhaps may not have any other uses, and I don't know that it will fit another oven, because it might be specifically made for the, well, it would have been specifically made for Westinghouse. But oven racks, they're usually the same width, so there's a fair chance they will go in another oven, or someone might decide to repurpose them and make a set of wire shelves out of them for in the shed or something. So I think they've got some value. The rest of the stuff in here is just going to go in the steel bin. The actual baking pan was a bit stained on the bottom, so I don't think it's saleable, but it will be handy for shed use, so I won't throw that out. But as far as value on all these other racks, I think I'm going to stack them all up and put $5 a lot on them. I don't have time to try and make something out of them at the moment. I think it has potential, but we'll put $5 a lot in the shop and see how we go. Someone might buy them just as little supports in the garden to grow beans against if you've only got a small garden. Don't know, but I reckon they're of better value than just clean steel. It will reduce some of our total from up here, but not by a great deal, because they don't weigh enormous amounts. But even if we took 60 cents off that total, it won't make much difference to this figure here. So we'll just put racks, etc., and we'll say $5. Now that sums up everything I've got, other than I'm not including any value for the insulation, and if that is useful in a shed or in someone's ceiling, it's going to be useful value, but we won't put any dollar amount on it. But let's add up what we've got here. This whole extra stage really only took another 5 or so minutes, just chopping all the plugs off the wiring. The rest of it we already had. We've just reallocated how we're going to dispose of it. So we have 810, 835, 840, 940, 1440, 2340, 2840. So suddenly the numbers are getting more interesting. We still only had an hour plus about 5 minutes. As I said, that hour could be reduced. It was an hour and 10 initially, but I'd get through that a lot quicker. So suddenly we've got a reasonable return for our time. So that works well if you've got a way of selling these other bits and pieces. If you're purely just a scrapper with no outlet for the other bits, I don't think this job's worth it. But as far as I'm concerned, well, I think I'd pick up another stove if someone needed one picked up, and I'd take the time to pull it apart. And the insulation might be very handy as I get more and more of that for my shed. The hardware all adds up. I didn't really allow a great deal for some of that, and I think I've priced all the parts super cheap so they'll sell quick. I could certainly try a little bit more on them. So there we go. I think that's a pretty good experiment. Hopefully you've learned something from this. You'll no doubt apply it to your own situation. But $28 for about an hour's work is pretty good. Alright, thanks for that. I'll do more of these videos, and I'm going to do some other ones on bulk scrapping. I have a wall of microwave ovens here. There's about 10 of them, and I've got quite a gathering of computer monitors down there. And what I thought I'd do with those is do a scrap out video in multiples of 10, so we get a decent amount of stuff to weigh at the end, and I'll keep track of my time and just see if it's worthwhile. But as far as a electric stove goes, or an oven, I would definitely pick one up again in my situation. The only proviso probably is that it's clean and reasonably modern. I wouldn't like to pull apart an old one, particularly with the chance of it having asbestos in the insulation. But also, they're dirty jobs if it's an old oven, whereas this one was pretty clean. Okay, thanks for watching. Catch you next video.